debating is never a good idea unless you are some kind of politician in a politics debate and you want your constituent to kind of like know what you care about, what your ideas are. That's okay, but 90% of the times in everyday conversations or business conversations, debating is never a good idea, and forcing your opinion, more importantly, is never a good idea.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Life Up Education TV. Today we have another special guest all the way from Italy. His name is Alberto. Welcome, Alberto.
Hi Natsune, thanks for having me.
Yeah, and thank you very much for joining me today. So today I wanted to have you because I know that you worked in, well actually, so we're gonna explain what you did. We're gonna like properly give you an introduction of what you did. But the reason I wanted to have you today is because recently we had a very interesting conversation about negotiation and also just interpersonal communication in general. So why don't we talk about that today a little bit? Let me fix the camera a little bit here.
Yeah.
So why don't you start from telling us who you are, like what setting you had practice in like interpersonal communications.
Right, sure. Well, let's say that professionally, I've been dealing with negotiation for a while, in the sense that my job is essentially helping entrepreneurs and investors in general buy and sell businesses domestically as well as all over the world. And that's what I've been doing for pretty much my entire professional career. So about 11, 12 years. And that really gave me an opportunity to get a lot of exposure to, of course, communication and negotiation, which is a big part of what I do. When I was younger, that was just probably a little fraction of my working time. But over the time, of course, things have changed. I became more senior and I got to spend more time dealing with everything related to getting a deal started, executing the deal, and negotiating every single step of the deal itself. So this gave me a kind of like a very interesting perspective about human relations, about human interaction. And at some point, I realized that was an area that I wanted to learn more about, both from a personal standpoint and from a professional perspective. So I started, learning more about it, reading a bunch of books, so getting more information, and the whole thing is pretty much about being a better communicator myself. A lot of the things that you can apply on the job are very much applicable across every other area of your life, and that is very fascinating to me, of course. And that's the reason why I started, getting very much into this whole negotiation and broadly speaking, communication word.
Right. So one thing I definitely wanted to talk about is like, so one of the things we spoke about before is how can you disagree with someone, right? Like, what would you do when you disagree with someone? And I have two stories to tell. So I personally know you very well. And one of the things that fascinates me a lot about you is that you are very, very resilient, right? And I guess in that sense, you have a capacity to have an empathy for people. And you're very kind. Like, you have a very kind approach to people in general. You're very patient with people that in a short time, like in a short game, I feel like you have the capacity to let the other person win. For example, if you have an argument, because you understand how to be patient with that person, right? But I think that's a strength. That's an actual strength, and I think that's very hard to actually master. I don't think like in today's. I don't know if today is the good word to describe, but with everything happening so fast with technology and everything, where there's this element of speed and everything, right? And we kind of apply the same approach, the speed approach, to human relationship, which definitely actually takes the patient, takes like long-term perspective, takes like actual effort. And I
Right.
think you're really good at that. Like, even if with this technology age, I think your way of approaching relationships are very, very patient. And I definitely want to talk about that. What do you think about that? And also, another thing I thought about was, the other day I posted something on Instagram and someone reached out to me, and basically, I don't know this person that well, you know, and he basically disagreed with me. That's it. And I know that he's in a position that he doesn't necessarily want to hate on me or anything like that. And then he texted me many times. And at this point, I kind of know that he wants to be liked by me, right?
Mm.
But then the first approach, or the first, I guess, thing that he would say is by arguing with me, right? But that's not really like approach when it comes to wanting to gain the attention from someone, right? So what is the strategical, like a good strategy in that, like to first approach someone and then get attention? Like, it is the argument works, like if you want to gain attention from someone? Like, what do you
Mm.
think of this?
No, that's an excellent question. I think you're raising a great point, and this is something that I've been personally struggling a lot when I was younger, because I always had a tendency to debate, which is what typically people do, right? Whenever you are in an argument and somebody has a different opinion about you,
Mm-hmm.
your instinctive reaction is to actually debate, right? We want to force our opinion into someone else's mind.
Mm.
That happens by default, I guess. There are some exceptions, but we are somehow wired in that way.
Mm.
And I guess the reason is because we just want to be right. We just want to feel important. We want to be winners. We don't like to be losers. And so every conversation, to some extent,
Mm.
turns into a kind of like an opportunity for us to win. And those little wins make us feel good. And that's the kind of dopamine kick that we get when somebody agrees with us, right?
Mm.
It makes us feel good. So that's what we try over and over and over. And so it takes a whole lot of effort, I guess, for us to really move away from that automatic response and try to use what I start to realize is the best approach here. And the thing is, um, debating is never a good idea unless you are some kind of politician in a politics debate, and you want your constituent to kind of like know what you care about, what your ideas are. That's okay, but 90% of the times in everyday conversations or business conversations, debating is never a good idea, and forcing your opinion, more importantly, is never a good idea. um, the great thing to do all the time is listening. This is possibly the most untrained skill ever. People always focus on speaking. People always focus on themselves, right, on their performance. And they don't really focus on listening, when in reality, that's the key. Um, the reason why arguments come up in the first place is because people don't listen. They don't open up their ears. And even when they do, in reality, what they are doing implicitly is waiting for the other person to stop talking so they can make their point.
Mm.
And so the whole time is basically wasted. You think like you're listening, but you don't really care. You by default already decided that your opinion is worth more, is right, is stronger. And so you're just gonna probably politely wait for the other person to stop talking. That's a mistake. That's a mistake because, first of all, there's always some truth behind everyone's opinion. I believe so. It's about putting yourself in the other person's shoes, seeing reality from their perspective, and understanding their reality in an empathetic way.
Mm.
um, when people say something, it's because they see life in a certain way. They had certain experiences. They believe in something which could be different from you. And those are the main drivers that make them express their opinion. You could have totally different drivers. And so your job is not to force your own drivers, but to get a real understanding as much as possible
Mm-hmm.
of the other person's driving. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with those things,
Mm-hmm.
but it means that you have to connect at that level and show the other person that you're listening. Um, if you when you are in a conversation with somebody and you're talking, right? I'm talking right now.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to interrupt me abruptly, right away, you just interrupt him and you start talking about something else, I would probably be okay because we know each other and I wouldn't be making a big deal out of it. But subconsciously, I wouldn't be feeling good.
Yeah.
I probably feel hurt a little. And of course, the less is the degree of knowledge and intimacy that you have with the other person, and the more you feel offended somehow, because it makes us feel that the other person is not interested in us, is not listening, is not making us feel important. And this is just this kind of like corruptive behavior that causes people to pull up walls. And so the whole conversation becomes more like a defensive conversation where everyone is trying to protect themselves and protect their ideas and try to, force those ideas into the other person. So that's what I believe. So everything that is about debating, criticizing, one of the typical things that we do, and I do it myself a lot of the times. Actually, now I'm trying to get rid of this habit, but yeah, I did it a lot in the past, and sometimes I still do it, is when somebody says something, we go like, I understand, but that's the kind of reaction that we have, which means, all right, I got you. I heard you more or less, but you know what? Listen to me. Listen to me. What I'm going to tell you is more interesting. And that pretends to be empathetic, but it's not. All right. That is not a good communication style. So if people were trying to actively listen, make questions, dig deeper into someone's positions and opinions, there will be a lot less arguments. You will be probably surprised to find how much common ground you can find out. And even if you don't find common ground, which is possible, you still develop a trustworthy relationship, and you might even pull the other person to your side. That is absolutely possible. But you would never, you would never convince someone of something if that person doesn't trust you, if that person doesn't feel comfortable. People open up when they feel comfortable, but when they feel rejected, when they feel, that there's some kind of resistance, your natural reaction as a human being is to be resistant because you sense danger, right?
Right. So that brought me up like two things, and two things I wanted to mention. Something that you said triggered me to think something. The reason we like parents is because they love us first, right? And maybe that's like the dynamic how human works, like human relationship works. Like we tend to like someone or love something when we receive first. Like I think this is the natural system of how it works. And maybe that has to do with what you were exactly talking about earlier, right? What do you think of that? And also another thing I wanted to say is, okay, actually, let's talk about this first. What do you think of this?
No, I think it's true.
Because like your need is not necessarily you wanting to be heard, but it's more like, can I trust you is the actual issue here, right? Like when you have to argue with someone, it's more like, do you hear, like it's more like I'm correct, like you gotta agree with me. But if you look at this from very like a core or the fundamentally, what this speaker is doing is just basically seeing if the speaker can have a trust to the listener, basically, right? Like it's just a test that this speaker is doing instead of actually wanting to be heard. What do you think of this?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a combination of the two things, I guess. On one hand, it's about feeling heard. We want people to listen to us. That is very important. And on the other hand, you need to have that trustworthy relationship if you want this person to open up to you and share information with you, and eventually consider your option as a possible option, you know. Okay. But as long as there's tension, as long as everybody is defensive, that is not going to happen. That it's very hard for that to happen. You're going to remain in your lane. You're going to defend your safety zone, so to say, and you're not going to consider the other person's opinion. And you know, there's no data, there's no fact that can actually convince you of the opposite. So the whole process is an emotional process. I guess that's what a lot of people don't understand. We tend to believe that people agree or disagree with us based on facts and data. Right. And oftentimes we just try to show them a bunch of numbers and figures and, you know, this is what it is because data says that. But human brain works very differently. And so data is second in the list when it comes to us making a decision. The first one is emotion, and we only use data to kind of like back up our decisions. And so because everything is so emotionally driven, if we want to be good communicators and avoid arguments and make more friends and close more sales and all that, we have to fully realize that and understand that people are driven by emotion. So if they feel good, if they feel like you're not attacking them, you're not forcing your opinion, you're not trying to sell something to them, but you're being very open, very honest, very understanding, and you're listening, then they feel much better. And to some extent, I guess it's a weird mechanism. So if I come to your side and I somehow show that I understand you, you feel like you owe me the same thing subconsciously. You don't feel like you want to be all, all like aggressive and you want to get back at me, because I'm not being aggressive. I'm being the opposite. And so
like confronting never works.
You feel more inclined.
Right. Like,
yeah.
Like we have this like we need to prove to the other person that we're right? Like, but that just doesn't work. Because another thing I often talk about is like, well, I mean, this is something we talk about too, but you know, people can't agree with the point that they don't see themselves, right? Like like you said, coming back to earlier point, like people make decision based on their experiences, based on their perception and emotion, which build from their experiences, I guess, more correctly.
Right.
And, you know, something I say often is like, you know, when people come try to argue with me, or when people find my contents not agreeable, I think it's just a timing, you know, it just takes timing too. And, you know, given that our life condition is so different, like me choosing to be entrepreneur versus someone else who is not entrepreneur, maybe my tone of toughness sometimes is a little bit too aggressive because, you know, this person is not necessarily at the level of desperation, or I guess survival mode, you know what I mean?
Right.
So I think it just comes down to what serves you. And another thing, like you said, like I never try to impose my opinion on other people. Once again, that is because our context of life is just so different that it's just impossible for one fact to be applied in both cases, right? So I very much understand that as much as I have my own opinion, which seems to be appreciated by others as well, but at the same degree, I really don't expect anyone to agree with me, you know what I mean? Because everybody needs to find their own truth. And once again, something that I say might not speak to you at this very moment because your life circumstance is very different from mine. But also when you go through maybe something similar, then you will finally find what I said as the truth at the time, later on or something like that. Like it takes timing as well, you know? So I decided during this journey, I decided that I will not focus on controlling how people see me or how people interpret me, because that is out of my control. Like I cannot control
Right.
how people look at me. I cannot control their opinion on me or of whatever I say, right? So
Right.
that's kind of how I'm approaching. And I think it gives me the courage to like basically just move on to whenever, like I focus on production, right? Like I focus on not being the correct one. I focus on
Right.
producing, like producing something. So what do you think about that?
No, I think that's the right approach. I think we just need to make a distinction, whether it's sales or not sales. If you want to sell something at some point, you want to try to convince others, right? You want to be influensive because you have to close a sale. But if we are not talking about sales, I agree with you. There's really no point in trying to force your opinion into someone else. I guess that there are ways to somehow make the other person see your reality. This again really depends on what you're talking about, if it's life experience or versus other things. Of course, this whole mechanism works a little bit better, I guess, in sales because there's an actual, product or an actual service. But generally speaking, I definitely agree with you.
So
There's no point.
in the next topic, in the next episode, let's focus on sales in the next episode. Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, no, sure, absolutely.
Okay.
And
Well,
yeah.
yeah, so I think this is actually becoming like a pretty long interview, so I'm gonna close it here. But Alberto, thank you very much for coming today to speak with us and tell us what you know about negotiation.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Okay. Bye-bye.